Computer. Nice. Okay, very good. Let's get started. This is going to be really, really good. I think you guys are going to like this training. It's going to be how to accomplish more by detaching from the outcomes, right? And so on the surface, that sounds like really weird. You say, wait, what a second. I need to focus on my goals. I need to focus on production. I need to focus on what's going on in my business. I need to focus on hitting my targets. And that's true, but this is going to be different. So we're going to use this training over the next 35 minutes or so to work our way through a handful of things. And we're actually going to write some different action items up to make you think a little bit differently about your goals and your targets. I have it, in the book, I talk about how setting goals is like, it's not really a great idea. Like you have to do them. You have to have a scoreboard. You have to have something where you can see guideposts to show you where you're at with your business, right? But the thing is, you can't. If you're never going to hit your goals until you always drop to the level of your systems, in the level of your foundation, in the level of your habits, both good and bad. You're never going to jump up to your goals until you build that foundation better and build those daily habits better. And so it's all your goals and hitting your goals and hitting your numbers and growing your business very quickly. It's all predicated upon number one, doing the next right thing, and then number two, making sure you get that foundation down correctly. And that's going to be the kind of the basics of our training, right? So what I want to do here, let's get cranked up. Let's just get going. Number one, it's natural to have disproportionate focus on our outcomes. It's how we're measured and how we're paid, but the same focus can prevent us from executing with excellence in the moment. And the perfect example we use here is choking in sports and in business is very similar. It's because you have so much concern on the outcome, it stops you from getting down in the moment and being able to execute. Like the trick is to go through your day, obviously doing the next right thing and having, you got severe focus on like the top of the mind of what you're doing that day, those main 3 or 4 key points of activities that'll get you to the target. And it's kind of like imagine a football game where the coach is just sitting there staring at the scoreboard. He gets paralyzed about what to do versus focusing on the game. Like, what do I do here? What's the play call? Like, what do I do next? What's the next action we're going to take in this game? You can't, if he's just sitting there focused on the scoreboard, it's going to be a very, very big problem, right? And it's not easy because the thing is, a lot of us hate to lose, right? We hate losing, so we hate missing targets. A lot of us, we hate losing more than we like winning. I know for a fact I'm like that. Eric, you were an athlete. George, you were too. I mean, can you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd agree.
Right. So we have to maximize that moment. And it has to be like on a daily basis. And one of the things that's happening right now is we're losing our ability to focus and stay laser focused because of all the freaking noise, dude. I mean, it's the social media, it's the Facebooks, it's the news everywhere, it's the internet, it's the cell phone ringing all freaking day long. It's always going, right? There's always noise and almost none of it's good. You ever notice that? Like, you ever noticed how, like, when you get on the internet, it's just terrible? I mean, it's almost all drama or it's all crap. Um, so, goal driven people will struggle with this a little bit because they get so attached to the goal that they have a hard time getting focused on those key 3 or 4 activities that they need to really hammer home and get much, much better at, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So Eric, what would be like one thing that you could get better at, or like what's one goal that you want to hit, but forget the goal. Think about what are the 3 action steps you need to take every single day, like massive action to get there.
I mean, the three things that I'm focused on every day right now, like there's like, so one is delegation, right? Like I'm delegating sales and cutting edge gifts, delegating some things that I'm trying to do now to elevate my role. And the second thing I'm most focused on in no particular order is my energy. So working out every day, meditating every day, learning every day, and then number three is just closing sales. So with the 3 organizations that I'm involved with, just driving top line revenue by closing transactions and closing sales, and training more salespeople. Those are the three things I feel like move the needle most for me.
Yeah, that's great. Training salespeople is going to be critical because that's what's going to get you up out of it and get you up above them. And then they're going to continue doing the same. You're going to continue to hit the same targets. It's kind of like think about this when you have a graph, right? And if you're at a certain level, like let's say your company started and now it's at $1 million a year. Well, and you're trying to go to $3 million a year. So the same activities that got you to $1 million, they're not going to be the same activities that get you to $3 million.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they did, they would have already gotten you to the 3 million, right? Like that's the thing. So you say, okay, well, I got to I'm just giving examples, right? Like I don't know, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
spitballing as far as the numbers go. But let's just say you're at a million. Well, you got to a million by because you were grinding and you were doing the sales calls and you were making cold calls and you were doing events and this and that. Well, now it's like, okay, well, the only way to do that is to leverage other people. And then I'm going to have 5 of me doing the same thing. So you have to train them up. So that's the activity you got to focus on is train, 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 train every day and get them to be lethal in their sales cycles. And then a couple of other things, right? Like 3 times the outreach. How do I do 3 times the outreach? And those are what gets you to that next level. So it's not so much focusing on the 3 million from 1 million. It's focusing on okay, every single day, what do I got to focus on to get there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Super super important concept. It's really hard and it's one of the reasons why almost nobody hits their goals. I mean, a lot of people do, but most people don't because they stop focusing on what gets them there. They stop learning what they need to learn and they stop putting intention on getting super, super focused on those key activities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know if Keith is still driving. I'm just gonna let him drive. I don't want him to get in a car wreck. Um, and obviously one of the things that the key to number one is get super focused and get obsessed with execution. Um, you just got to take massive action, and it's always doing the next right thing. If you do the next right thing, and then do the next right thing, and then do the next right thing, the results just kind of take care of themselves. You ever notice that? Like rarely, usually every single problem that gets created, usually uh, somebody either you've done something dumb or somebody in your organization's done something dumb or somebody's done a whole bunch of dumb stuff over and over that hasn't been confronted and hasn't been addressed, right? And so it's super critical that you get hyper focused on execution. Number two, it's common for those who hate losing more than they love winning to focus abnormally on the outcomes and they begin to play small. You can see this happen a lot, like if you're watching football games as well. Kind of going back to that analogy is the people start to play not to lose. Golfers do this a lot. They start to play super, super conservative. Football teams do it a lot, and businesses do it a lot. Businesses, when they're in a bind, what you should be doing is figuring out, okay, like what happens is if your business is like taking a huge downturn and a downswing on you, usually it's because of multiple things that have happened. And number one of which you're not doing the same things in the daily activities that got you there. But then you have to be able to you have to be able to double down and get hyper focused back on marketing and advertising. Because a lot of times people stop doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that happens um, more often than not as the businesses start to grow and they hit these artificial targets and they start hitting these kind of like soft ceilings, these low hanging goals that like are minimum, they're like base minimum, and then they get above it and they think they're doing okay, and then all of a sudden one little thing happens, their business turns, slows down, and they get paralyzed and they stop playing to win and they just start playing not to lose. They get super scarce of their mentality. I mean, the scarcity mentality versus the abundant mentality is, if you're in abundant thinking, you immediately turn the advertising on, you get super tight on your discipline with your staff, you implement or training with your staff, and usually you can turn it around. The scarcity model, because people are living in fear, they don't know what to do, so they let employees go, right? They'll let some people go, or they will try to pivot and they'll try to go figure out a way to make easy money somewhere else. George, have you ever? I know you're kind of early on in your accounting career, but have you ever seen anything like that?
I mean, I think it's kind of where I'm at right now. I don't have um, a lot of the results yet of doing these actions consistently, but got to make sure that I stay executing them every day, whether it's reaching out to people and developing relationships and getting the work done that I need to get done.
Yeah. Eric, I know that you've been going through this massive growth with the Grease Man, that whole thing on top of cutting edge gifts. But I mean, give me an example of where that happened to you because you've been around for a while. Where has that happened to you before, and then how did you get out of it?
What specifically?
Well, just where the business took a turn and you were having to figure out how to get, not play small. Like, how did you mentally take that flip?
For either one of the businesses?
Yeah, either
Um,
one.
like where I had to pivot?
Yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, basically, like something very simple that made a huge difference was, we were out in the field trying to go and like just stop by restaurants all day, and it was like driving the guys, crazy because they're dealing with all this rejection. We're wasting money in gas. We're hitting fewer accounts than we could have, and so I just basically hired a calling staff that would just follow, just one instead of hitting, 15 or 20 restaurants a day. Now we're hitting 100 restaurants a day. 150, 200 restaurants a day, and they're calling just setting appointments. So the guys that are going out and doing the sales, they're not just going and like they're only meeting with people that have already spoke to, had interest, and now we just have a high closing percentage. And so when we started doing that, like our costs, even though we had to pay for the callers, our costs on gas went down, so that was a net even. But morale was better. We were closing more deals, and we were just hitting more accounts, sheer volume of accounts that we were touching. So naturally, we went from closing one or two deals a week to closing one or two deals a day.
right. Yeah, that's great. So in the medical space, we see this a lot. What happens most of the time in the medical world is the marketing will take off and the clinic will get new patients, but then the marketing stops working. It happens all the time. And there's ways to get around that. Like what you do is you have different verticals that you run inside of a medical practice and like an accounting, maybe even with what you're doing, there's other verticals you can do to generate revenue. And obviously, if you're working on something, you never stop, you never pull off of something that works. It's working, it's working, working. But eventually, the marketing and advertising for the same vertical slows down, particularly if like you're in a smaller area, because you can only put that message out in front of so many people, right? But then you get what happens is you get other people inside of your ecosystem doing other things. Like if somebody comes in and they're trying to do weight loss, um, then you can close them on a lot of times they'll have a bad knee and you can close them on doing like a PRP injection or stem cell injection or something along those lines. And it's kind of like that second sale. And like for an accountant, same thing, you bring him in to do bookkeeping, but then you get him, the person goes through a divorce and now they need some forensics. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's so important to get super focused on the details of like, how do I grow my base of people? That's one of the strategies is just keep growing that base of people and keep working your way and focus on delivering and identifying how do I do that part, knowing that I can always have other avenues to sell them on more services or sell them on more products, right? So one of the things here that I want to talk about, it's super important to think about, is make sure as you go through your day, when you're at work, you're at work. We don't want to be distracted. We don't want to have the phone out. We don't want to be doing other things besides being hyper focused on our activities. Again, this whole thing about not focusing on outcomes means I want you hyper focused on the daily activities. What are those three or four things, right? Um, Detaching from the outcomes allow you to focus and maximize the moment, which is what I just said. We've talked about this already. Everything takes care of itself. And this is where karma kicks in just kind of briefly. When you're doing the next right thing and when you're actually serving others and you're trying to get super focused on helping others, it always works out in the long run. You'll never fail at always doing the next right thing. Does that make sense? It just is what it is. But if you start ripping people off, sooner or later, it's going to catch up to you. It's going to be a problem. It's going to be a massive problem. Quite frankly, I just got off the phone with a guy that I've been working with for a long time in Detroit, and he's super greedy. He's got big problems. It's hard to believe the problems he's created by being super stingy and self-centered with his money, and he's going broke. I mean, he's lost millions at this point. He created millions, and now he's losing millions, and it's going to get worse. It ain't getting better because he's not getting better. And I'm really glad, Eric, you brought something up, and we are going to touch on this real briefly. George, you and I have worked out together. Eric, you and I have worked out together a couple of times. And obviously, Keith, you and I have not worked out together. But how you do anything is how you do everything, right? But my point is this: like, you don't get in shape overnight, right? How do you get in shape? And is that important? Is it important for your business for you to be physically fit? Well, personally, I think it is. I think that it's super important, no matter what business you're in, but particularly if you're in healthcare. But I mean, no matter what business you're in, you should be healthy because it makes you a better version of you, right? So nothing gets better until you get better. I mean, that's just kind of how it works. So with that being said, George, would you agree that like it's super important to work on your mental state and to work on your capacity as a human, to work on your own personal development, to get your work on your mindset? You know, mindset comes from discipline. Would you agree that that's super important?
Yeah, 100%. I think that, if I had 50% of the time working at, the right mindset compared to double that, I'd be more productive in that 50%.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And Eric, I know you guys both do this, right? But I mean, how much time do you put in, George? How much time every morning do you put in working on your mindset?
At least 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And then sometimes 45 to an hour.
Yeah. Eric, what about you?
Usually like 1 to 2 hours.
Yeah. Now, is that including your exercise or is that including your?
Yeah, so like I would just say my whole morning routine is just about priming my mind and priming my body. Because even when I'm working out, like I've got an audio in, I'm listening to, building a story brand. So I'm learning, and I'm like, all right, cool. And I'm just kind of getting ready, getting in that mindset to go crush it. Reading, journaling, affirmations, meditation, prayer, all that stuff for me is kind of working on my mindset. And then by the time I'm done with it, I'm like, all right, like I know what today I got to do. I'm connected to the vision basically.
Yep. Yep. And I know you guys are. Keith has just come out of the hospital setting and he's working his way into a new business. So um, I wanted to make sure that he heard that because I know you guys do that as well. And I do, I do too. I'm going to see if he can unmute. He might still be driving. Let's see.
Oh, I'm here. I'm here.
All right. Good. What's your thoughts on that?
I'm actually in the clinic now. I'm running the saw periodically, but I got my headphones in. I think with mindset for me, I spend a lot of time in the gym trying to really control me. There's a way where sometimes our mindset gets away from us, and I spend a lot of time trying to control every aspect of my life. I do that through a lot of prayer. I do that through a lot of studies to try and expand my ability to comprehend things. I totally appreciate what everybody is saying. I'm glad to hear that other people are doing the same thing.
Yep. Yeah. By the way, you have walls up, so that's progress since the last time I saw the office. So there you go. Nice. Very nice. He's
Yeah.
getting rock and rolling.
I just finished the painting yesterday, so we're getting there.
Nice. Well, so what happens though is a lot of people they don't do that. Thank you for that input, by the way, Keith. They don't have intentional mornings. And I know George and Eric, I've known you guys a long time. And I already know that you did, and I'm glad Keith was able to jump in on that. And clearly I do as well. It's super critical. And one of the things I want you to think about is excellence is not being superior to other people, right? It's not being like above other people because we never compare ourselves to other people. I mean, that's for starters, that's just a really bad idea, right? So we don't want to do that. But excellence it's doing the basics better, being more consistent at doing the basics, and then doing them more often. So it's okay, how do I get better at doing what I do? And then how do I leverage the whole, most of this training is going to come down to how do you be the best version of you and get super focused on your 3 or 4 activities that you're going to get super consistent, get better at, and do more often. And then how do you train other people in your life to do it for you? And how do you leverage technology? How do you leverage systems? How do you leverage employees? How do you leverage money? How do you do that in marketing and advertising in such a way that you can get up out of your business? We don't want you working in it. We want you working on it. And just so you guys know, Eric, you'll enjoy this. This is a super short but important story. George and I we were looking at a business he may wind up buying. The guy generates about $2 million a year in revenue. He brings home a very big chunk of that because he's kind of a one-man show. So he's a very high income earner. But there's a difference in, when you sell a business, you don't sell it by EBITDA when it's just a one-man show like that, or when it's super heavy, or if the dude doesn't matter how much he's making, you go off of sellers' discretionary earnings. And we went through it yesterday, and we were able to realize that the business, not only is it predicated upon his actions and his behaviors, and the guy is about 760 years old, it also is predicated with no contracts. There's no contracts to guarantee that money that he's generating. He's probably bringing home 1.5, and he's paying taxes on it, but still bringing home, a really good living. But how much do you think that business is really worth? What do you think he really could sell it for?
I have no clue.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's a one-man show, it's like he is the business, so it's kind of hard to sell.
Yeah. I would say no. And again, I'm no expert, but I do know a little bit. I mean, I do have some ideas, and I have been trained up on what it looks like to buy businesses. The math would come out to be maybe $500,000. All right. So think about that. Whereas like a normal, and here's the other thing. I just talked to a good buddy of mine in Phoenix, and he's running a game with dentists, and he's got a handful of medical doctors as well. This equity group is buying his companies out, his clinics out at 5x right now. So anybody that's at a certain level, they just get 5x. And one of my clients is doing 7 million. She's getting a $20 million check next month. And then she's going to get 2 more checks worth $5 million. And so you can do the math on that, and it's hard to believe, right? But that's what a medical clinic that's like doing really good numbers, that also the owner operator is not seeing patients. They're just managing it from outside, and they've got employees down in it. That's how it works. That's how a business is supposed to be sold. Every business and every industry has a multiple that you should be able to get for that business. But if it's just you, and you build your business just off of your behaviors and your actions, there is not going to be a payday at the end anywhere close to what you think it's going to be, no matter what that industry is. It's just a seller's discretionary earnings. And if you have real estate, that's a little bit different. But I mean, I'm getting a little bit off track here. But I want to bring that up because one of the key activities you've got to do is you've got to build your business, and it may take a little bit of time, but you have to build it built on other people's behaviors. That's going to be one of the key activities. Like, who does what? How do I get out of doing this as fast as possible? Particularly Keith, you and George, because you guys are both new in account. We've got an accountant, and then we have a medical provider. And I know, Eric, you're building the biofuel company. You're doing that the right way. I mean, it's definitely way better than cutting edge gifts. Those activities, like what we want to do, like I want you guys to write up a few activities you could do to build your business based on other people's behavior real quick. Like what would that look like? George, can you give me a couple?
I think, we've talked about this before, but the biggest thing for me, and it's a bottleneck as well, is that, I can go out and get a client, sell work, and then I got to turn around and get all that work done, and do it really well to keep that relationship going. And, as long as I'm doing that, I'm just capped at however many hours I can work in a day. So, it's good right now because I need to understand and be able to do everything that I'm going to delegate. But ultimately, finding someone who can do the same thing is to the standard that we need it done is like the only way I'm going to be able to get out of doing what the guy is doing at 76.
Crazy.
So, and you see that with a lot of professional service providers. It's very common.
Yep. Yeah. Well, Eric, I mean, talk to us real quick, and then I'm going to ask Keith the same question. I know the story, and I know what you got going on, and you actually alluded to it a little bit just a second ago, like some of the things. But where can you leverage? What else can you leverage? I know you said you got a call center that you're leveraging, but what could be something else you could do to start putting a lot of intention on growing that business the right way, where you're going to have something to legitimately sell at a multiple of its earnings?
So a couple things. I mean, one, I'll tell you about cutting edge gifts. I was literally thinking about it this morning, and I was like, because I was thinking, like, what do I want my life to look like in 5 years? And I thought, well, I need to get rid of cutting edge gifts. And then I thought, unless I can get it to be a cash cow it's functioning, running, sales, growing without me, then it's like, okay, then it's worth keeping, right? And so, like the changes that I started doing, just ultimately, like that guy that you mentioned that's doing $2 million, but he is the business. Cutting edge gifts, if I stopped working, that business is going to evaporate within 6 months. It's just going to die out, and it's going to end. So the shifts that I've made in that business is, one, over the last 2 weeks, I empowered Gloria, who's done sales in the past, to handle all of her inbound sales. So we've got marketing that goes out, and so there is still a lot of passive business that comes in, but I don't need to be the one closing that. So like that part of the business delegated to her. We've got wholesale, which used to do a lot more. It's cut by 50% over the last year and a half. And so I empowered Sarah to take on wholesale, since she's already got the relationship. They know her, they trust her. And so I've kind of delegated that to her so that we can still have passive sales and grow wholesale. And the third thing that I did was the business primarily, since the creation was all determined, the success was determined on me showing up and running in-person events. And so I realized I needed to find a new strategy to lead generate and close sales, and also increase the average ticket size so that there's an opportunity for a salesperson that has a high income opportunity. And so I hired a marketing team that's doing cold outreach, sales funnels, all these different things that should start hitting in the next 30 to 60 days. And so from there, I'll be closing sales. And then once that's a proven concept, there'll be, ideally an opportunity for me to hire and train a salesperson that can do those. And now I've got reorders coming in. I've got a closer that can close sales. I've got somebody over wholesale, and then operations is running. And now I do have a saleable asset. That's kind of the shifts that I've made to try to get myself out of the sales process, so that I actually have something that somebody else could step into, take over, and buy. As far as Grease Guardian, I mean, just like you said, the different verticals, we've got services like pressure washing, commercial and residential. We've got different revenue streams that we could, instead of just oil sales, which is what we're primarily doing. There's other avenues that we could grow But right now we're going to focus all of, so there's Google ads, there's Facebook ads. Those are things that we haven't even got into at all. It's all just callers, because that's giving us, success. So until we start scaling up revenue, once we get some discretionary funds that we can, put back into the business, we're going to keep that rolling. But when we do, we'll start turning on some digital ads.
Yeah. So think about the activities on a daily basis that you're going to have to get better at, consistent at, and do more often in an effort to grow cutting edge gifts the way you want it to look, and write that up. Do a write up on that. Like, write that out, right?
Training. Yeah. Training, sales training, delegations, and improving the processes and systems. Right. That's the main thing, right? And
Yeah. Keith, what about you? Thinking about this, like, one of the things when you first come in, it's hard to do and it's hard to think about, but building a business, particularly in the medical world, in such a way that it's going to be able to be sold. What are some things you can focus on right now at the beginning to get better at that would help you start to build it correctly?
Sorry about that. I had to shut down the saw. I think the key thing, Ben, you and I have talked about it a little bit, is just running, with the staff that I have, getting them up and trained on how to close deals. And that's a big part that we're focusing on, kind of behind the scenes as I construct this big project.
Yep. Yeah. If I were you, I'd be focusing really, really heavily on, severe training and role play right now, and learning how to market. Those are the two big keys for you right now as far as your production lines. It's administrative lines, but it's also that's production that you're, and we can talk about more about that later. But and that's the thing. All these habits have to go towards production. All your habits, we all have good habits, we all have bad habits. But habits stack on themselves. So if you're exercising in the morning, do your meditation in the morning, start your day off by eating right, and then get into these high dollar productive behavior activities as fast as you can, so that you don't get sidetracked and you don't get distracted as your day goes on, and you can be super productive versus being just busy, right? We're all busy, but being productive is way more important. And there's also little actions like this, doing this kind of training, right? It's not like this training is it's not Tony Robbins, screaming at you as you're walking across fire, pumping you up, but it's still super important stuff, right? Like, it's not easy doing little things like training. It's not easy to take time out to do some training, but it's give or take 30 minutes here. And I think we can all take some stuff away. This helps me a lot, because it helps, working through this with you guys helps me focus on my activities as I'm growing my consulting up. I've got things I've got to get hyper focused on my day-to-day activities as well, and I already have some things that are popping up that crank up in about a week that are they're very high dollar, but they're also high production based activities that not a lot of providers can do. And luckily I've got the experience in it, but the thing is I haven't been doing those in a long time. And now that I'm getting back into it, I have to do things like practice myself. I have to do role play myself. So I'm just like you guys, we're all in this together, right? So that was it, really. We worked our way through. Just to kind of finish up, even the outcomes aren't shaping up the way you like. You got to trust in your training. You got to definitely trust the process for sure, and believe in the compounding effect of the right habits. And one of the things I want to kind of finish up with is super critical, is this thought of one of the biggest reasons actually that I don't want you to focus too much on your outcomes or your targets, because they're going to be good or they're going to be average or they're going to be bad as you move forward. And I want you focusing on your massive action steps, is because the truth is we don't know what's good or bad for us, right? We have no idea what's good and what's bad. So just because we could miss a target, or our building could burn down, and on the surface, it could look like this legitimate disaster. But in the long run, it could wind up being the greatest thing that's ever happened to us. And I actually have two experiences myself that I can tell you that in the moment I thought were legitimate disasters. And quite frankly, they were. But afterwards, a few years down the road with some hindsight, and I look back, they were by far the biggest moments in my life where my moments pivoted and I went in a different direction and my life looked much different, much better, much bigger, um, much uh, higher revenue, all these things. And so I want you guys to think about that. That's another reason why we don't know what God has in front of us. We don't know what's good or bad for us. I do want you focusing on your targets and your goals. I want you at least making them, because you do need guideposts. You do need to keep up with where your business is. You do need to be holding your staff accountable on their statistics. And if you don't have any staff, you damn well better be keeping yourself accountable to your own statistics. And that's super, super important. What are those activities that you really need to do to move forward, and are you holding yourself accountable first? And so just keep that in mind, right? Like, it's all about those action steps on a day-to-day basis. So, Eric, what'd you get out of the training? Did you like it?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is it made me realize, like, okay, cool, like I've got these things and I've thought about these things, but I need to put a little more just like intentional structure behind it, right? So it's like, okay, like I just, just having the conversation, when you're asking me those questions, like, what do I need to do? I'm like, okay, I need to do this, and this. Okay, cool. Just spending a little bit more intentional time every day going, okay, how am I making sure that I'm implementing that in my daily routine and not just going, what do I got to do today? Right.
Yeah.
And then just making that a daily, incorporate that into my daily habit. And the other thing too is like just focusing on those daily, and then like in a year and a half, where my life could look completely different. Just making sure that, like, okay, yeah, focusing on the daily, but recognizing that like it's the little things every day over a long period of time that are going to create the lifestyle and the change that I want to see and I want to live,
Mm-hmm. Yep. Very good. Yeah, you have a lot going on. You really do have a lot going on. I really want to see you. I mean, it's your journey, but man, I would love to see you get laser focused just on one thing.
Yeah, just got to narrow the focus,
Yeah,
got to narrow the focus.
you'd be lethal. George, what about you?
Yeah, I think Eric summed up a lot of great points, and something that I've noticed recently. Just I was in Charleston and I had all my dynamics and different things, and now I've been out in California for the past month. Is that I kind of like took a step back and was like, what have I been spending my time on? Because like I thought it was all productive and I thought I was doing all the activities that were moving me forward, and now I'm like I'm out here and I'm like, man, I feel like I have a lot more time from just some of the things I'm not doing anymore. So I think that's really important too, because all of us we know what the right action is, but sometimes you can get caught up in that busy trap and you're doing things, but it's not what's actually moving your business or your life forward. So it's really important to look at that every day and to make sure you're still centered on that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I have so much more time out here, and I'm like, what the hell was I doing the last couple months?
Well, it's just because nobody out there works. They're all Democrats living off the government. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. So what you're talking about, it's interesting you should bring that up. I'm going to email you all the part of my book where I talk about being busy versus being productive. And it's The Tale of Two Grandpas. It's a short little blurb, and believe me, it's worth reading. And that'll kind of explain that to you a little bit more. And that does happen, man. Working from home, it's easy to get distracted. I mean, it really is very easy to get distracted. So, Keith, what about you? Did you get something out of it? Do you enjoy it?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Uh, it's good to hear other people's perspective, but it's also good to have confirmation for a lot of the practices that I already have. I'm I'm a 50-year-old guy, so I'm not really in the early onset of my youth starting this. I'm kind of midlife crisising it. So, anyways, but I've appreciated everybody's conversation. Thank you.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, that was it. I'm going to email you guys the that little blurb in the book. It'll only take you like 5 minutes to read it. Yeah, we'll just keep moving forward. We're going to do. I'm not really sure yet. What I'll text you guys what next week's going to be about. You know, there's not a lot of employee. We've got a couple of office managers from clinics that are going to start joining us. So I'm going to start doing some a little bit more in regards to HR and like employees and hiring and things like that. But I'm also going to stay super tight on personal development for you guys because I think that would do you guys a lot of good. I may break it up and I may just do something different with them and just do a different training. But I appreciate you guys being on. I'll record this. I'm going to put it on YouTube and I'll catch up with you guys later on in the week.
Sweet.
All right.
Hey, Ben, you mind staying on for a minute, Ben?
Yep.